Welcome back to Black Sheep Cinema. It's only been a billion years since the last one, but hey, maybe that's a good thing. I've had all this time in between to get better at video production and shit. Okay, fine, I've been too lazy to do it. The Cinemasochist videos take a lot out of me, so the last thing I wanted to do was another episode to a sub-show from fucking months ago. But since I can't top my review of Prophecy, I'm going to gush about Friday the 13th Part 5 instead. Because if there's one thing that I can do without doing any research or rewatches with note-taking, it's talking about the Friday the 13th films. To start off, let's do a brief rundown on the general Friday the 13th franchise. Yes, I realize I kind of already did that in my review of Jason Takes Manhattan, but I promise that this will be a lot different than that. And if it's not, and you haven't seen that video anyway, who the hell cares? Jason Voorhees has been a beloved horror mascot since the early 80s. In fact, he was leading the charge as a slasher icon for 4 years before Freddy hit the scene. In fact, the arrival of Freddy almost brings to mind the internet reviewer-verse. Freddy vs. Jason may have come out in 2003, but did you know that there have been plans for it since 1987? Friday the 13th Part 7 was originally meant to be Freddy vs. Jason. Freddy only had a couple of sequels out by then, so it really brings to mind a newcomer video producer begging to cameo or crossover in some well-known producer's show. Don't get me wrong though, I'm not slagging the Krueger. I love the Nightmare on Elm Street films, but for now, his Christmas sweater wearing crispy ass can bugger right off. This is Jason's time, motherfucker! Well, actually, it's kinda not. Sort of. Judging by various fan opinions, just from knowing and meeting other people that love the Friday the 13th movies, there's a definite love for the character, but there are fan favorites in the sequels. I find that most people's go-to favorite Friday movies are Part 4, Part 6, and Part 7. And the ones fans tend to hate are Part 5, Part 8, Jason Goes to Hell, or Jason X. Now, 4, 6, and 7, I can't really argue with how good these ones are. 4 in the franchise in general is probably the best straight-up horror film of the bunch. It succeeds in actually being quite scary with its dark atmosphere and a solid build-up with very likable characters that you don't particularly want to see get dead. Yes, I'm going to show the scene. Now that right there is the definition of partying hard. 6 and 7 are of the same tier, carrying with them a great build-up with some very solid character writing, and both have their individual strengths. 7 is beloved for the introduction of Kane Hodder and one of the coolest looks that Jason has ever had, and Part 6 is a quickly paced thrill ride with excellent black humor. It continues the story of Tommy Jarvis, a young man that's been in a mental institution ever since being the first person to kill Jason Voorhees when he was but a wee Corey Feldman. On to the hated sequels, and I'll make this brief. I get why people dislike Part 8. Well, actually I don't, because it's a blast, but let's just pretend that I understand. Jason Goes to Hell, yeah, I do like it, but it's a gut punch to a lot of fans. Body-hopping Jason Voorhees means no actual Jason on screen, and that's pretty lame. And I fucking hated Jason X. Hated it! Okay, moving on. Oh, for fuck's sake, do I really have to explain why? Mary Sue lead, annoying characters, Uber Jason looked hokier than Lord Zed. Is that fucking clear enough for you? Bichku matarino. Now, these are definitely the rightfully hated on entries of the series. I could accept wanting to piss all over them as a fan, but I never quite understood the disdain for Part 5. I've tried thinking it through, and all I can think of is that Jason isn't the killer in the film, but even that falls through for me because it isn't like Jason Goes to Hell where it's technically Jason, but in other people's bodies. Part 5 was another attempt at a whodunit, like the first film was. They went with Jason actually being dead and even cremated, but there's a killer out there using his MO. Is it really him back from the dead somehow? Is it a copycat? If so, why? It's intriguing. I really like it. The movie takes place a good several years after the fourth installment in the franchise. Tommy Jarvis is a young adult plagued by nightmares, flashbacks, and hallucinations. His tango with Jason at such a young age left him mentally shattered. He's withdrawn, painfully shy, and all around just sucks at talking to people and really can't help it. He suffers from a massive case of PTSD, but the doctors at Pinehurst Institute believe that they can help him re-enter society. Pinehurst is not even really an institute, it's out in the country with tons of freedom and is meant to be a last step of psychiatric help. Of course, this isn't a feel-good story about a man's climb back to sanity. This is a body count film and bad shit happens. Near Pinehurst is a chunk of land owned by a real crazy bitch named Ethel. She lives there with her dimwit son, Junior. Let's just say she isn't terribly happy to be sharing the area.
You think I don't know what those two perverts were doing in my yard?
Say it like you mean it, Ma!
Would you shut the fuck up?
Alright, so we can check off crazy hillbilly family. There'd be threat number 1. Threat number 2 would be the fucking killings that start going on in the general area. Shortly after Tommy arrives at Pinehurst, a real charmer of a patient named Vic decides to cut down poor Joey here because he doesn't share in his zest for chocolate bars. You probably really want to see and hear this exchange, don't you?
You know something? I really love it here.
I hate it.
You know, to be perfectly honest with you, I never really chopped wood before, but it certainly looks like fun.
Leave me alone!
Here, Vic, want a bite? Here, I'll just put it over here. And later on, when you're hungry, you can have it. Well, if that's the way you feel, forget it, Vic. Just forget it. But I think you're really out of line.
Vic is hauled off to jail. The body count begins, and Tommy's everything gets worse. Okay, look, the movie deeply wants you to think that Vic might somehow end up being imposter Jason, but it spoils the hell out of itself super early on with this little scene. Oh gee, I wonder if it's the paramedic that clearly has some connection to the fallen fat boy. It's a Friday the 13th film, revenge tends to be a central plot point, so yes, it's Roy the paramedic. Everybody knows it's Roy, you'd have to be dense to think it wasn't. This doesn't take away from the film though, in fact it's a nice touch. Roy is right out in the open, at the scene of every crime, while the authorities are on the lookout for the killer. Roy the paramedic racked up a body count score of 18 in the name of his chocolate-loving son. This, at the time, was the highest body count in a Friday the 13th film, exceeding the death toll of 13 in the prior film. But Jason Voorhees was known for his creativity. It wasn't about quantity, it was about quality. So how does Roy's style measure up to Jason's? Well, I just so happen to have another Friday the 13th mega fan who's willing to give you his opinion. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. Cecil Trachenberg of Good Bad Flicks.
A lot of Friday the 13th purists will complain that Part 5 isn't really part of the series because it's not about Jason Voorhees, but I disagree. Yes, the killer in this one isn't Jason, but the movie still has all the elements of a classic Friday the 13th movie. Actually, you could argue that the movie has a better story than a lot of the other Friday the 13ths. In most of the Friday the 13th movies, it's just them figuring out that Jason is actually back and he's going around killing people. In this one, though, there's an extra added element of mystery. They're not sure if it's Jason back from the dead or a copycat killer, or if it's just Tommy Jarvis and he's finally lost it and is going around killing people. The movie has one of the biggest body counts in the series, and some of the kills are very creative. I was always a fan of the 1-2 punch of Tina getting the garden shears to her eyes, and then her boyfriend Eddie getting his head crushed with a leather strap. Anything that happens to your eyes always freaks me out. So if you haven't seen 5 in a while, you really should go back and give it another view with an open mind. At the very least, it's still a million times better than 9.
So, the movie clearly has some inventive kills. It's appropriately gore-soaked to appease any fan of the 4 previous entries in the series. Roy did justice to Jason and his masquerade, and even had kind of a cooler mask. I actually really dig the blue stripes. What do you guys think? Tommy's mental state, already flip-turned upside down, is made worse as the body count rises, especially since it seems like Roy is actually trying to pin the deaths on him. Eventually, Pinehurst is directly targeted, and the dead patients are stashed in Tommy's room, conveniently enough on the night where Tommy flips the fuck out and beats up Ethel's dumbass of a son, who for whatever reason decided to pick a fight with Tommy. This beatdown is actually pretty goddamn excellent.
I said, are you hearing me? Fuck you, lunatic!
This is actually a genuinely interesting facet of Tommy's character. It makes sense that he's become so lethal. Throughout the years, he had seemed to become a survivalist, as if he was getting ready for Jason's return. This is something that they dropped completely in Part 6. In fact, Part 5 was outright retconned. As much as I love Tom Matthews, his version of Tommy was weak compared to John Shepard's portrayal of bottled-up sadness and aggression. Shepard's Tommy Jarvis is a tragically flawed character, but a likable one. You can feel his torment, and you feel sorry for what happened to him. For the sake of context, Jason killed his mother, and to eventually stop him, Tommy shaved his head to make himself look like a young Jason in order to distract him. He uses the distraction to literally chop Jason up with a machete. I think it's a safe bet to say that this is the most brutal way that Jason has been stopped in the entire series of Friday the 13th films. And now I can talk about this with it actually making sense. The climax of Friday the 13th Part 5 is actually quite fucking gripping. Tommy confronts Roy in a barn, thinking that it's actually Jason, and gone are Tommy's survival instincts. He's suddenly a deer in headlights, frozen with fear. A combination of emotion can be seen here. Tommy is both paralyzed with fright and naturally riddled with disbelief. This appears to be the man he was preparing to face and kill, but he doesn't want it to be, which is actually a pretty natural reaction. Almost too fucking natural for what you'd expect to be a low-rent, dumb little slasher film, which in effect is kind of one of the film's flaws, and does in a way make it easier to overlook. Like any slasher flick, it has fan service, heaps of violence, and really goofy characters.
All right, either you got the car started or you're a dead man. A rat-a-tat-a-tat-a-tat-too.
But that still doesn't mean this is a bad film. It still contains all the charming elements from other entries in the series, before and after this one. Part 5 actually has some of my favorite characters and character interactions in the whole series. There's this kid Reggie, whose uncle is the caretaker of Pinehurst. Tommy and Reggie become friends, and I really love the way it's handled.
Man, you are one scared cat. Where I come from, you learn to be scared of nothing. They call me Reggie the Reckless. No spider would scare me. Yo, man!
Also, I love this scene. It's perhaps the most well-delivered exchange of dialogue in the entire franchise.
Violet, you said too many places. Huh? I said you said too many places.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
Don't think Victor and Joey will be joining us this morning, Violet.
Or any other morning.
Reggie.
Oh, God. I'm sorry.
You don't set a place for a dead person.
I said I was sorry.
What's going on here?
Also, Vi. Vi is just... she's one of those characters you don't want to see get killed. Maybe I just have a thing for angry punker chicks. Don't we all, though? I think we do. A lot of people think that horror films in general are just 40 minutes of shit dicks being the slimiest shit dicks that they can be, and then dying horribly during the finale of the film. Now, I won't bullshit you. There are films that are exactly that. But if I were to suggest films that are the exact opposite, Friday the 13th Part 5 would be right around the top of the list. I love the characters in this film. I care when they die, and the plot is interesting enough to where it doesn't just feel like torture porn. It's played more like a murder mystery, but with extra violence and nudity. It's an excellent combination of camp and genuinely good performances.
Don't.
You don't have to get all twisted out of shape about it. I mean, you act like you made these things or something.
I did.
Solid.
When it comes to relatable characters in works of fiction, Tommy Jarvis is right on the money. Something that's common in horror and sci-fi culture in general is collecting of memorabilia or prop and mask making. Tommy Jarvis in many ways is the embodiment of a horror fan who is forced to become a hero, unfortunately a mentally scarred one. Before coming across Jason, he was just a kid that loved monster movies and making his own masks. Part 5 was directed by Danny Steinman, who's also responsible for the sleazy and super exploitive Savage Streets. With that under his belt, I think he was able to make this entry in the Friday series a lot edgier than the previous films. There was a bit of controversy surrounding this film. Dick Wieland, the man who played Roy the paramedic, had for many years taken credit for also being behind the hockey mask, when in actuality every scene with Imposter Jason and Dream Hallucination Jason was actually stuntman Tom Morga. For many years, Wieland would go to conventions signing 8x10s of Morga in the blue chevron hockey mask.
What a cheesehead.
A cheesehead indeed. My favorite entry in the Friday the 13th series, this is not, but it is definitely up there. I'd consider it maybe my second or third favorite. I don't know if I like it more than Part 4, but I definitely think it's on par with Part 6. Well, I think that about does it. Thank you for joining me on the second edition of Black Sheep Cinema. Hopefully the third one comes out a lot sooner. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some serious business to attend to.
Just 'cause you're playing cool, don't think you got this fool tonight. Alright. Don't ask me to stay. Don't think you got it made. No, no. You're wrong. 'Cause you can't fake it anymore. I know what you're waiting for. I should turn away and walk right out that door, because I know love is a lie. With that look in your eye, you threw away your disguise. You thought love is a lie. It's something you can't deny. So baby, why even try? You're used to getting your way. Not tonight, no way.
Hey, how come you turned that off?
I am the Lord of the Dance, the Saint of the Step. Thanks for noticing, boyo. Hey-de-day-de-diddly-day-de-day-de-day-de-day.